My dad loves his money. He loves money so much, he even sleeps with stacks of bills under his pillow. He doesn't just love earning money from running a factory, he also loves taking it from other people. The people who have the misfortune of working for him already don't get paid enough because he's so stingy. But the smallest of mistakes from them, and he docks their pay. I'm Jillian, and my story is about how I taught my dad a lesson by dating a homeless guy. But before anything else, remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell icon to show your support for me. Dad was never really around for most of my childhood. He was always flying out of the country for business trips. So I grew up being used to him not being around for my birthdays, the holidays, or even my graduation. I didn't hate him for it. He provided for his family and we never wanted anything. But the problems began when his love for money grew to be more than the love he had for my mom and me. He began to neglect us even more than he already was. Some years, we'd only see him for a week. My mom became unhappy. I always saw her crying in her room, and she told me she was considering divorcing my dad. She eventually did. And my dad ended up winning the custodial battle for me. I really wanted to live with my mom. She was the only one who understood me, but my dad made it very hard for me to even have contact with her. Even though she was allowed to have me on weekends, my dad made it so that I was never home. He would force me to go on the trips he took and justify those trips as him showing me the ropes of the business. In all honesty, I couldn't be less interested in inheriting his exploitative, pollution-spewing factories. Every time he took away my weekends with my mom, my dislike for him only festered and grew until I began to hate him and his money obsession. Money was the reason my family crumbled, and my dad was the reason I couldn't even spend time with my mom. Even worse was when I turned 18. He began introducing me to his friends and all his friends' sons. One of them was a full 20 years older than me. I found that exceedingly creepy, and I told him as much. Just go on one date with the guy. One date, said my dad dismissively as he scrolled on his tablet, barely even paying attention to my protests. He's 38, Dad, I exclaimed. Age is just a number, hun. You should know that. Henry's a nice guy. And besides, he owns the country's best logistics company. Imagine the possibilities there. Our factory will gain an access to unprecedented distribution network. We'll be filthy rich, said Dad. Age is just a number, Dad? Well, so is a prison sentence. And that's where Henry's gonna go. Money. It's about money. Always money, I yelled. This isn't even about me or my future, is it? Of course it's for your future, honey, he assured me with as little sincerity as he could manage. Like I said, when you marry into his family, we'll be rich. Don't you want to secure your future children's futures? Children? I said, shocked at how set he was on his plans. You're already rich, Dad. Is it ever going to be enough? My dad shot a sharp glance at me. It'll be enough when I know you're not going to waste all my money and end up being destitute before you're 30. Marry Henry. You can live the rest of your life living in a large enough mansion where you won't even have to see him if he's not your cup of tea. I'll set up the date. I'll have the driver take you both to some sushi restaurant. Henry loves sushi. You'll go on the date. You'll marry him, and that's the end of it. My dad's very lucky that I didn't choke Henry with the very sushi he loved. As if that was going to be the end of it. There was no way I was going to marry some strange guy I didn't even know. Not my cup of tea. He wasn't even the same age generation as me. Nobody was going to tell me who to date. But since I was still living under his roof, I still had to do what he wanted. Or at least appear like I was. So I did go on the date with absolutely no intention of entertaining the notion of getting engaged to Henry. I was upfront and honest with him. As soon as we sat down at the restaurant, I told him exactly what my dad had planned for both of us. Luckily, Henry was a total gentleman about the whole thing. He understood what I was going through. Henry was gay. And his whole life he had to hide his sexuality from his father, whose only goal in life was to see him married to a woman. Even after he'd come out, his family still pressured him to date women, and that was how he ended up agreeing to go on a date with me. Apparently, his father threatened to take the company away from him and to send him away to some Catholic re-education camp. It was so messed up. And by the way, those things don't work. I felt for the guy. My troubles were suddenly put in perspective. That night, Henry and I parted as friends. He promised he'd help me in any way he could, and I promised the same. But it was clear to both of us that for the sake of our individual happiness, marrying each other would not be the solution to our problems. Instead, it would only cause more problems. I wonder how we came up with that answer. I told my driver to head home. I walked out of that restaurant not knowing what to do or what to tell my dad. And as I sat on the nearby park's benches, reflecting on my decision to go against my father's demands, I met Jacob. He was homeless, if you couldn't tell. He told me he'd been sleeping in the park for a week by the time we met, and as he had a bunch of student loans to pay off, was only making minimum wage, and didn't have anyone else to lean on, he went bankrupt. He was kicked out of his apartment after failing to pay his rent, and all he had left was what he could carry with him. I felt pity for him, For the second time that night, I came across someone who had it even worse than me. I felt a strong urge to help Jacob, and because I was in a position to do so, I decided I would. And as I looked at him, something clicked in my head, and I got a sudden idea. What would you say to a project-based gig? I suggested. Jacob's face lit up. Really? Anything. I would do anything. You have no idea how much that would help me out, he saw. I saw tears of gratitude pooling in his eyes, and I kind of felt bad for what I was about to say. Well, it's not like any job you, or anyone for that matter, have ever had before, I said. Whatever it is, I can learn on the fly, Jacob assured me. I'm not very good with money, but I work hard. There won't be much hard work involved, I said, but there will be a good bit of acting you'd have to pull off. Are you kidding me? I can act my ass off, Jacob said, his excitement mounting at the anticipation of what I was about to propose. What is it? Is it a TV thing? Am I going to be an extra in the movie? Nothing like that, unfortunately, I confessed. I took a deep breath and muttered to myself, well, here goes. What is it? Jacob pressed. I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend, I said as fast as I could, hoping he wouldn't understand what just came out of my mouth. For a second, Jacob tilted his head as if in thought. And then he said without hesitation, yeah, sure, easy, let's do it. What? I exclaimed. I couldn't believe he didn't even have any objections. And when I asked him if he was certain, he replied, To be honest, I'd done it before. One of my buddies, Kyle, introduced me to a boyfriend for hire app. But once the lockdown started causing restaurants to shut down and the order to stay in isolated bubbles came into effect, I couldn't rely on that side hustle anymore. That's how I ended up in this park. At first, Kyle helped me out a bunch, but even he had run into troubles himself. Now that the lockdown's lifted, I could go back on the app again, but who'd hire a homeless dude? So, yeah, I'll be your fake boyfriend, no problem. We chatted a bit more, and I told him about my situation and about how I wanted to teach my dad a lesson. We got to know each other as much as the short evening would allow, and in the end, I told him I could send you the payment up front. That cool? Cool, Jacob said, visibly joyful. That would be fan-frickin-tastic. You have no idea how thankful I am I stayed awake long enough for you to find me. You're heaven sent, Jill. Wait, can I call you Jill? You can call me whatever you want. You're my boyfriend now, aren't you? I said. We both laughed at the ludicrousness of the situation, and then he asked, Wait, am I gonna get a makeover? Am I gonna get pretty womaned? Just so you know, I'm not adverse to being hauled around to shop for clothes. Nah, I told him. I want to see him just the way you are. You're perfect. Jacob gave me a wide grin. He looked so goofy and his smile was electric. I know I wanted to get revenge on my dad, but something about it made my heart go pitter-patter. I arranged for him to stay at a hotel that night, and then I took Jacob home the next day. The look on my father's face was priceless. I told him I was dating a homeless guy and he almost lost it. I even went as far as to tell him that it was love at first sight and that we'd already filed for a marriage contract, so there was nothing he could do to stop us. Well, he tried. He tried to have his friends at the police station arrest Jacob for trespassing in his property, but I promptly bailed him out and made sure the cops understood he was my fiancé, and that my father was simply overreacting. Jacob stayed with me for over a month. I eventually did take him shopping for new clothes. I made sure to rub it in my dad's face that I was going out with someone who had no money to his name, and that I was happy despite the fact that he was penniless. Jacob was great. He always backed me up and played the part perfectly. He even went as far as to kiss me whenever my dad would see us hanging out. It was surprising at first, but he was such a great kisser, and it didn't hurt that he was hot as hell. He was sensitive and always made me laugh. My dad eventually gave up and let me do what I wanted when he saw how happy Jacob made me. I even got to see my mom again. So, Jacob's time with me was almost done. My problem was, I was beginning to fall for him.